Hi everyone, welcome to the Wool and Spinning Podcast. My name is Rachel and I can be found pretty much everywhere as Well for Pearls. This is episode 11.2. It is November of 2015 and I'm coming to you from just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. You will notice that my voice is pretty bad. I'm croaking along. I don't feel too badly anymore, but I've been sick, really sick all weekend, and pretty much everyone in our house has been sick. And we've had a sick dog. So anybody who's been following along on the Ravelry thread for the episode 11 thread on Ravelry will have seen the photos that I posted of Charlotte. She's doing well. Her hotspot has healed over. It was right back behind her ear here, and it was quite large. She ended up with an infection in her ear as well. So she's on systemic antibiotics as well as topical antibiotics, but she's doing well. She's got her appetite back. She's sort of back to her old self. So she's still wearing the cone, which is pretty hilarious because she walks around the house and bangs into everything. But other than that, she's doing well. The kids are well, finally. James is still fighting his cold, but it's just me now that sounds terrible, and I'm just getting over the last little bit. So thank you to those who have reached out and said that they hope that everybody's feeling better. I really appreciate it. I think I'm just going to jump right into the show. James is watching a little movie this afternoon because he is so tired. And I have not a lot to talk about, but a few things. So we'll jump right into it. So today I would like to cover the giveaway winner for the Yarn Inc. Superwash Merino that I've been giving away the last month. It's upstairs and is tucked away enough that I can't get to it because Nora's fast asleep, and if I go up there and start rummaging around, she will wake up. So I don't have it to show you guys, but those of you who've been watching will have seen it a few times and know what it was. That was the fiber that was provided by Alyssa of Yarn Inc. Thank you again, Alyssa. So I will announce the winner for that. And then I have what's on my wheel. It's the same as last time, but I thought I'd show it to you anyways. Handspun knitting, and then a course that I just took over this past weekend, and I wanted to talk about that and share with you a little bit about what that was all about. Those of you who follow me on Instagram will have seen some of what I was doing. And the last thing is the Sweet Georgia Yarn Club reveal, since it's the end of the month. For those of you who don't want to see the club reveal and you want to be surprised, or you aren't interested, I'll give you plenty of warning and you can say goodbye before I actually show it. So for the winner of the Yarn Inc. Fiber, Yarn Inc. is located just outside of Calgary, Alberta. It's Canadian indie dyer Alyssa. She's got beautiful colorways. If you're interested in her stuff, there's a link in the show notes below at wellforpearls.com. The winner is Vicky, Knitwit Vic from Sebringville, Ontario. Vicky, if you could get in touch with me, please send me your mailing address on Ravelry, and I will send that out to you ASAP. So congratulations to Vicky. I did it by random number generator this morning, and it actually picked me, which of course I'm not going to keep the fiber. So I redrew and it came up as Vicky. So she's been very active in the Ravelry group thus far. So I was really pleased to see that Vicky had won. I thought that I would mention really quickly about the Fall into Winter Cal going on with Kate and I of the Stitch Addiction podcast. Her and I are running the Fall into Winter Cal through the end of December, probably into January. There's a giveaway from Sweet Georgia Yarns, a bag, and I am giving to the spinners in the group who are knitting with their hand spun a braid of Cheviot. Cheviot is a down breed. They usually spin, Cheviot fiber usually spins up as a, just trying to get the colors right, there you go. Cheviot usually spins really beautiful woolen yarn. You can spin it quite high twist. It's a little bit longer stapled than your typical down breed. And I dyed this myself, and I thought that, so it's, down breeds are usually a wee bit shorter. One of the local shop owners out at Brooklyn Brothers, she calls Cheviot BFL on steroids because it's longer stapled like BFL is, but it's super wash because it's a down breed. So down breeds you can throw in the washing machine on gentle, and they won't felt. So this will be, it's a 4-ounce braid that I dyed. And the hand spinners in the group who are submitting hand spun socks will draw a name, and somebody will win this from me. So that was really fun to do. I kettle dyed it with acid dyes on the stove, and I don't think I put enough vinegar in initially, so when I pulled it out and rinsed it and it dried, it was really muted and it was really beautiful, but the pinks weren't like saturated like that. So I threw it back in and I did kind of a sprinkling of the dye stock and got some much brighter colors, and I actually threw in some black too, so there's some gray in the braid that came out really nicely. So I hope that you guys like that, and somebody who submits hand spun socks for the fall into winter cow will receive this. I think that's all the housekeeping for now. What is on my wheel was the same. I'm just going to check on James, make sure he's okay. What is on my wheel currently is actually the same as what I shared with you in episode 11.1. It's still the seconds from the Sweet Georgia Yarns studio that I had found. This is called Cloud Break, and it was seconds because the colors aren't quite right. When you look on the website to see what the true color of Cloud Break is supposed to be, it's quite a lot darker, and it's much bluer. I think this came out quite a bit grayer than what Cloud Break, the Cloud Break colorway, is supposed to be. I'm spinning this quite fine, hoping for a fingering weight 2-ply. And my plan is to knit the succulent shawl by Maria Monska of the Stitched in Sweden podcast. And I've already prepped my next little bit of fiber, and I just have to start spinning. I haven't put the next bobbin on my Hansen yet. I've just not been really interested in spinning the last couple weeks, so I am kind of waylaid. But I'm hoping to have this finished in December because I'd really like this to be my Christmas knitting project. I forgot to say this is Polworth and Silk. It got a little bit felted in the dye process, and that probably has something to do with the colors, and it just, something went wrong. And also the braids, because I had 2 braids, I had a total of 8 ounces. As I was unbraiding them, both braids halfway through, they were broken. So you can see in the bottom of the bag here is the other half of the last part of the braid. And that's, I don't mind, that's totally fine. I love these colors, and I'm really hoping that when I apply them together that it'll end up being quite a mixed, not super blended, like that I'll have some clean spots where the gray plies together and the blue plies together, but then lots of areas where I have the cream and the light gray blue plying next to the darker, so that it ends up being quite analogous. And I'm looking forward to casting on for the succulent shawl. And like I said, I'm hoping to work on that over Christmas, but I have a lot on the needles right now, and a lot of commercial yarn that I'm trying to knit through, and I'm a wee bit overwhelmed. So I'd like to get some projects off my needles first before I put a whole lot more on. I think that's why I haven't been spinning very much, because I've been really focusing on knitting. So that takes us to knitting. I have been working a wee bit on my Shackleton Cal project. This was my knitted swatch that I showed you guys last time. This was my BFL, 85% BFL, 15% alpaca blend that I made on my drum carder. This is natural undyed BFL and natural undyed alpaca. And alpaca fleece comes in many different colors. I think there's 22 or 23, maybe 25 colors of alpaca fleece. This just happened to be white, creamy white. And so with the creamy white BFL, you can't tell what is a strand of BFL and what's a strand of alpaca. It's really knit up beautifully. And like I said, I showed this to you guys last time. And so my plan for the Shackleton Cow, which is being hosted by Sarah over on Fiber Trek, the Fiber Trek podcast and the Fiber Trek group on Ravelry, is I wanted to knit this shawl called the Canopy Shawl, and it's by Melody of the Mandarins podcast. She's located in Latvia. I talked about her last episode, so I won't say too much more. But I'm not loving it. This is on 5mm needles, and I'm just starting the first lace section. So I'm going to knit the first lace section, and I'm going to knit into the next stockinette section. And then I'm going to decide if I'm going to keep knitting or not. I really like the pattern. I'm just not sure it's right for this yarn. So what I'm thinking that I might do is actually take this swatch and I'm going to dye it. And I think that will decide for me whether I'm going to keep knitting or not. Because once I finish the shawl, then I'll dye the shawl. And what I'm thinking about doing is actually dyeing it in logwood, which is a natural dye color that comes out purple. And I will show that to you in a few minutes. But I'm thinking that that's what I'm going to do with this, because I think the cream is just yelling and screaming at me because it's, sorry, the needles keep banging, because it's just so clear and clean. It's almost kind of unapologetically cream white. And I thought that I would really love having a cream shawl. And I think I'm just, all I can see is the parts of the yarn that aren't perfect. You know, the parts of the yarn that are a little bit thicker and the parts of the yarn that are a little bit thinner. It's just screaming at me right now. And I think if I dye it something really soft, that'll take that away from me, I think. So I'm going to do some experimentation. Here's my absolutely massive cake of BFL alpaca. It's a beautiful, beautiful yarn with a beautiful sheen. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just really, really lovely yarn. I have about, I think I have about 800 yards. I'm almost kind of tempted to see if I could knit a sweater, but I don't want to get through the sweater and then risk having to rip it out. So I think that's why I'm kind of waffling about this, because my goal for the Shackleton Cal, and it's over 18 months, and it's supposed to be a project that's sort of epic for you, was to make a blend, create the yarn, spin the yarn, and then knit something from that yarn. So going from sort of all the way through by designing a yarn. And I think what has caught me up is I designed the yarn and I had sort of this certain idea of what I wanted. And now I'm stuck on what to do with it. So that's all part of the Shackleton Cal. It's all part of muddling through a big expedition and figuring out things like this. So it's been a very interesting project thus far. So that's my hand-spun knitting that I'm working on, and there's really nothing else going on. Everything else is commercial yarn and knitting for other people, which is really unusual for me, but I'm really excited about everything I'm working on, but it's not hand-spun. So I wanted to talk about what I did over this past weekend, and I'm going to sort of spend the rest of the show talking about that. I took a 3-day course through Maiwa, which is a local to me company here in Vancouver. It was a 3-day course called Introduction to Dyeing. It was taught by Natalie Gambro, and for anybody who for anybody who knows who she is, she's an excellent instructor. She's a local artist from the Sunshine Coast, and she's originally French, and I really enjoyed how she articulated herself in the class, because sometimes she couldn't explain in creative terms what she was trying to explain to us, and so she would flip into French, and it just really added to her excitement and passion about dyeing. Her niche, if you will, and what she really focuses on in her own art is natural dyeing. So on the first day, which was Friday, and it was 3 6-hour days, but every single day we went over, she really focused, like you could just see her passion on Friday when she was talking about the natural dyes. And we did samples, and we got to work in groups of 3. And I'm not going to show you the fabric samples because quite frankly, I'm not that interested in them. And I didn't take the class to learn about the fabric samples. I took it for the yarn and the fleece. So I'm only going to show you the yarn and the fleece. I hope that's okay. And you could really see in the class that there were some big knowledge gaps when it came to yarn and fleece. Most of the people that were there because they either were sewists or because they were working on costume design, or they were working trying to figure out what it is that they like to do in their creative world. There were only a few of us in the class that were there because we were knitters, and there were a few of us that were spinners, and we were the ones that were the most interested in the yarn and the fleece. I think I was the only one that was as into the yarn, into the fleece, and Natalie was kind enough to spend some extra time with me on the first day and the last day, which was Sunday, talking to me specifically about my needs as a spinner when it comes to dyeing fleece. And I'll be sharing some of what she shared with me over the coming episodes as it kind of is relevant. So because I've already talked about logwood, I thought that you're going to hear Charlotte walking around. Because I mentioned about the logwood and the BFL, I thought I would show that to you first. So this was the logwood, and it's this really lovely gray blue that came out. It's not really, it's coming up as very like gray on the monitor, but it actually came up as like a very like a lavender, very soft, very gentle color. And the group that dyed the logwood, I didn't feel like they were very excited about it, but I just loved it. I thought it was really, really beautiful. So that was the logwood that we did. We also did cochineal, which are insects, and they ground them down. The group got to grind them with a mortar and pestle. That actually is coming out perfectly. And they did 3 extractions to create their dye stock, and then they created this beautiful color. And a lot of the people who were, and one of the people that was in the Matter group, which is this one, and Matter, I think everybody's heard of Matter. I feel like Matter is the one that like even I had heard of. This always makes me think of Turkey, like the country. And of course that's where a lot of the Matter these days comes from. So one of the people in the Matter group and one of the people in the cochineal group, we had these silk scarves that were part of our dyeing projects. And they were like this, and I'll talk about mine in a minute. But one of the people from the Matter group over-dyed her scarf in the cochineal dye pot. And one of the people from the cochineal group over-dyed her scarf in the Matter pot. So they basically did the opposite. And the person that had the cochineal originally and then over-dyed it with Matter, she ended up with a scarf that was very similar to the Matter color. It came out this quite light, sort of a medium rust color. But the person who did Matter to cochineal and ended with the cochineal dye ended up with this beautiful, flying fiber, ended up with this beautiful, very soft burgundy color, like very pastel. That isn't a color that I usually am drawn to, but it was beautiful. And with her coloring, it just looked amazing. But totally different dye results. Same dyes in opposite order, totally different results. It just, mind blown. At that moment, when I saw those come out, and Natalie had been doing her own and showed what she had done, and she had done a couple of over dyes to show people kind of the depth that you can get with natural dyes. At that moment, I just thought, yeah, I so want to learn more. So I'm hoping to take another course through Maiwa that's a 6-day natural dye course that's offered in the spring, and it's again in the fall. The difficulty is getting into it. This was henna. It matches my hair. Beautiful results on wool. Quite uninteresting, although I liked it, on the cotton. Came out this really like a very linen color. So that was what we got on the cotton versus the wool. And this was both henna. amazing, like totally different. And then our group got my favorite color, which Marianne from Smith & You on Instagram picked up right away. Good eye, Marianne. We got marigold, and I just, loved it. The only thing was we didn't do an extraction. We used the marigold as it was and threw it right into the dye bath rather than straining it or making it extract and then straining that and throwing that in. So we've got marigold petals in our fleece. So note to self for later, and that it just will not shake out no matter what I try. I'll be back in just a moment. So because our group got marigold, our project scarves that we got to dye, we also got to do marigold. So this isn't coming out quite right. So I thought I would back up a little bit because it's coming out, showing up as very dark. The black is obviously quite dark, but it's more yellow than what's showing up. It's more of like an ochre yellow. It's not so golden. Anyways, we did shibori tying and resist dyeing. So I used a clamp on mine, and you can see all this black that came up in mine. And my other group members, one in particular, she ended up with black on hers as well. So our dye bath got contaminated because of doing this resist dyeing. Some of the clamps had rust on them, and we just threw them in. You know, we didn't know any better, and it changed the composition of our dye bath. So at the end where I had clamped, it came out very black, and I only used one clamp for mine, so I just kept like pulling it up like this, and then I clamped, and that's how I created that patterning. And then at the other end, I actually, at regular intervals, went down. I scrunched it up and I tied it all the way down to the end. I really love my results. It just turned out beautifully. And we were really kind of relieved in the end that we had inadvertently thrown these rusty clamps in, because we got such beautiful texturing inadvertently. And that's the beauty of natural dyes. So really, it's coming out very golden, but it's more yellow than that. It's almost like a yellow, it almost has like a green undertone. I just love it. Think of like ochre. That's totally what this color is. So that was the natural dyes part of the course. And then the other thing that I wanted to share, I'm not going to talk about the Procyon MX because that only is for cotton, and quite frankly, I didn't care. It's not something that interests me at this point. I took notes, I listened, I participated, obviously, but at this time, cotton doesn't interest me, and I don't particularly want to spin cotton at this time. I'm very much interested pretty much only in wool. So the last day was acid dyeing. And I thought going into this course that would be what I really enjoyed, and that was what I really got out of the weekend, was how to dye with acid dyes and walk away feeling like I had this language around acid dyeing. And that didn't really end up being the case. So the group that dyed with black felted all of their stuff, their fleece and their yarn, so they really were going to town. That group, there was not one knitter in it, and I think they just kind of didn't realize that they were being a bit too rough, and that, like, you know, it happens. So because I was really interested in how the acid dyes act and the colors that you can get on fleece in particular, I brought from my stash into class some gray Jacob that has been sitting in my stash for a really long time. And I offered it to the group to include in, or I offered it to Natalie, the instructor, to include it in the sample pile that everybody got. And she was very gracious and said that that would just be so wonderful. And so we did very primary colors with the acid dyes. And so our group got red, so I didn't do this project because I'm not a big red fan. This is coming out pretty true to color. Like it's just completely unapologetic red. And this was the yarn that we got because she wanted us to be able to see what acid dyes look like before you start to play, before you start to combine colors, before you start to hand paint, before you start to manipulate them and make, 2 parts fuchsia, 1 part yellow, 1 part whatever other color. So these are very like unapologetic. But everybody, without fail, everybody in the group loved the results that they got on the Great Jacob. So this is Corriedale, cream white Corriedale, and this is the Great Jacob. Same dye bath. Amazing, right? So this was our group. This was the green. It's not coming out quite true to color. It's a difficult color because it's very teal. This just came out beautifully. I really love the Gray Jacob and how this reacted. This was cobalt blue. So this was how it came out in the dye bath. And this was the Jacob. It's not coming out quite dark enough. Like this was very dark. This is very dark. Think a royal navy blue. So that's what this color is. It's much darker than this. And I think this was my favorite one of all of them. This was turquoise. Even the monitor is like blowing out from the strength of this color. And this is what the Gray Jacob came out like. This is, again, it's darker. The monitor is having trouble with the blues. So these two were the Gray Jacob. This was the cobalt blue, and this is the turquoise. And they came out quite dark. The Gray Jacob fleece really like saddened. It really muted the colors. And it ended up with these beautiful dark heathers. Got me thinking of like a bobble hat, from the Shetland Wool Week. And like combining colors and stuff. It just totally got my creative juices going. The process of acid dyeing was a lot easier. I've been playing with acid dyes for a few months now. And the process of acid dyeing is way easier than natural dyes. I'm not gonna lie about that. Like it was absolutely easier. People found it easier. They found it more straightforward. We were following dye recipes, and you could tell that people were just like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. We can do this. We can do that. A couple of groups mixed up what they were adding at what time, and everything came out fine except for the felting, which was a temperature issue, not a dye bath issue. We talked a lot about batch setting. We talked a lot about with the natural dyeing, leaving stuff for longer periods of time to deepen the colors. We talked about hand painting and what that would look like, and making a dye stock solution for acid dyes, and then steaming to set the colors, which I was really interested in. It was just a phenomenal course overall. So it kind of got me playing. I had already been playing a little bit, but I thought I would show you some of the stuff that I have been working on. I have been doing some kettle dyeing, and I've been really having a lot of fun and really enjoying it, but it's kettle dyed, so the colors aren't super bright. So this was some gay wool dyes playing with their greens, one of their green colors, a blue color, and a yellow. And this is on Wensleydale. This is just shy of 4 ounces. And it turned out really beautifully. But it's very soft, it's very muted. Just protecting it from the light. It's a little bit darker than what's showing up on the monitor, but I really liked how that came out. The next thing that I did was a hand paint. Actually, no, I'll save that one. And the next thing that I did was a sprinkle. So this was an over dye. This is superwash wool. I'm kind of thinking that this is going to be socks. Bright yellow. So I did a kettle dye originally with the greens, and it came out very much like this. So I decided to let it dry, do its thing, and then I soaked it again, and I sprinkled indigo blue acid dye, not natural dye. It was an acid dye called indigo, and yellow, and they call that color daisy, and I sprinkled it over top. So I made my dye stock solution and then I just kind of sprinkled it with a dropper over the fiber. And it gave me this great like speckle dye. Really cool. So this is 4 ounces. You can see. So I did leave some white of the fleece. I did leave some white because I really like how leaving a little bit of white just tones down some of those colors and it won't scream at you when it's in the yarn. So I'm really interested to see how this spins up. And then I did some Cheviot for myself, and it's purples. This was kettle dyed. See if I can get away from the monitor and you can really see it. This is purples and blues. I used some black, so it's very gray. It turned out, I really like it. I'm looking forward to doing probably socks with this again too, just because with the Cheviot being able to put the Cheviot in the washing machine, these would be great for socks. And this is super wash too, so I can throw that in the wash. And then the last thing that I did was some more. It was Wensleydale. This was hand painted with black, daisy, and red. And it's really bright and it's totally crazy. And I really, really like it. So I painted it so that it goes black, red, yellow, red, black, and so on. And I did like a certain number of repeats. And I'm sort of thinking that I'll spin this up as a 2-ply and just see what kind of blending I get. This is Wensleydale as well. So it's pretty crazy and super, super, super fun. So I need to rebraid this. It's been photographed and stuff, and I just kind of threw it all together, and that's what it looks like in the very black. This is one of those colorways that, because it does have so much black, it's very difficult to see. But when you pull it apart and have it in a pile, it actually has a lot of this hot pink and tangerine orange. It isn't as black as it looks, which is really interesting. So that's what I've been doing for dyeing, and I've been having a lot of fun. I can see how it's just completely and totally addictive, and I can't wait to start playing with the natural dyes. Maiwa gives you quite generous coupons when you take courses with them. So I did use one of my coupons already because I knew that I wanted to get started with the natural dyeing right away, because I have some Romney in my stash, and I also have some more Cheviot, and I have some BFL, and I have the canopy shawl that I'm thinking about over dyeing once I finish knitting. So I wanted to start playing a little bit and see what I can get. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. It's been like very not spinning related, but it has been fiber related, so I guess that counts. Coming up next is the Sweet Georgia Yarns Club reveal, and I thought so for those who aren't interested, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in December. And happy Thanksgiving for those of you who are American and celebrating this weekend. For those of you who are interested in sticking around and seeing what the November Sweet Georgia Club looked like, I thought I would insert some photos here and show you guys what it looked like before I speak about the yarn that I spun. So the colorway this month was called Frozen Grapes, and it was meant to signify an experience of Felicia's that happened a few years ago when they saved some ice wine, and it did eventually go bad because ice wine has a limited shelf life. And the colors totally remind me of a grape vineyard. My husband said it didn't remind him at all, but he is colorblind, I think, so he's not really, but so what I did with this braid was I spun it end to end. I did absolutely no fiber prep. I literally unbraided it, put it in a pile next to me, and started spinning. I spun on my Lendrum at quite a high ratio. I chose 17:1 because this is superwash merino and nylon. I wanted quite a lot of twist. Merino is a high crimp. In its staple length, it has high crimp. And so when you're thinking about whorl ratios and thinking about where to start, especially as a beginning spinner, this really helped me when I first started spinning. A great place to start is by knowing what your crimps per inch are, and that gives you your whorl ratio to start at. Anne Fields talks a lot about this in one of her books, and I tried to find the quote where she talked about it, and I just couldn't find it. but it's a great place to start. It doesn't mean that you have to spin the entire braid on that. Just do a little sample, a little ply back test, and see if you like what you're getting. And if you do, then it's probably the right whorl ratio for you. And it's just a beginner place. We can talk about whorl ratios more in the future. I've had quite a few questions about it, but that's a great place to start. So because merino tends to be a high crimp fiber, I wanted these to be high twist. I started at 17:1. I kind of wish I had gone a wee bit higher, and the colors aren't going to come out properly, which is why I included the photos, because the purples are very blue on the monitor, and in real life they're much redder. And the green is coming out as brown, and in real life it's much yellower. But I spun it end to end onto one bobbin, and then I let that bobbin rest for a couple of days. And I've talked about this before. I usually don't let bobbins rest. I usually just start plying right away, and I've talked about why that is in the past, so I won't repeat myself. But with this, I did let it rest because I was going to be Navajo plying or chain plying. If you hear somebody talking about Navajo plying, they're talking about chain plying. It's the same thing. And the reason for that is when I'm chain plying, you're pulling fiber off of your Lazy Kate, off of your bobbin. You're creating a loop and you're pulling that through to create the 3-ply. Sorry, excuse me. And when you're creating those loops, it's nice to have a yarn that is relaxed, that's not got a whole bunch of active twist in it. When you hear people having real plying nightmares when they Navajo ply or when they chain ply, sometimes it's because the twist is still too active. So I did let it rest for a few nights, and then I set up my Hansen with the woolly winder, and I Navajo plied it. I got 323 yards of 3-ply because it's Navajo plied, and this is 113 grams, and the Sweet Georgia braids are usually a little bit generous like that, and the reason why I got a full 113 grams out of it is because I didn't sample. So that's sort of a little bit truer to what it looks like, but again, it's much redder. It turned out really nicely. As I was spinning this, I was getting all these high and mighty ideas about maybe doing a shawl. I was looking at Stephen West's Daybreak shawl, and once it was done and it was off the wheel, I just looked at it and I was like, this is superwash merino and nylon. It's going to be socks. So that's what it's going to be. So beautiful club this month. Very straightforward in terms of color management and what I did to spin it. It spun very quickly. I spun this. I had somebody in the class over the weekend ask me how long it would take me to spin a braid of fiber. And I said, that's not a fair question because I have to spin like the wind for a club every month. And I do tend to blast through braids of fiber. And this took about, oh, here comes James. This took about 5 nights to finish. 3 of spinning, couple nights to rest, and then plying. So that's what we ended up with. Always going into the bathroom. So, yeah, so that was Sweet Georgia for November of 2015. And this is going to go into my stash. And once I clear off my needles and I'm ready for some new projects and some new socks, I am actually really looking forward to casting this on. At the end of the show here, I will show a couple of photos of what it actually looks like and what the true colors look like so that you can see. I'm going to say goodbye. I hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving for those who are celebrating Thanksgiving in the US. And to everybody else, happy spinning, and I will see you in December.